Hi there, my name is Bryce, and welcome to my Wild Shores Behind the Scenes project. Now, this is going to consist of a couple videos that sort of explain different aspects of my Wild Shores project, and to start off, I'll go with the very beginning of how I came up with a concept for it. So what essentially happened was Generation 2 of Bionicle had been finished during the summer that I started to come up with this idea, and it was really disappointing because I really loved the new incorporation of the creature creating building system known as CCBS, and how it's incorporating into just the story that I loved with Bionicle and everything. It was such a massive kind of fictional universe to think about that all the creations that I've made and everything suddenly didn't really have any new direction that it could go into beyond what I would imagine. And it's a real shame that I sort of missed also the multimedia aspect that Bionicle and quite a few other LEGO franchises, of course, had really embraced. So what I thought I would do was originally I'd start to post in some online forums, like a little story or something, and have some photos to go along with it. But I decided I should go beyond that, and I should actually apply all my design skills that I've learned in graphic design, 3D printing, web design, and things like that, and potentially even create my own website entirely to host all this stuff. So I had to start somewhere, though. I was trying to think, I want to go with another sort of island concept, something that's going to have very laid out boundaries of where this thing starts and finishes, because I'm not going to go for an incredibly large scope, but still something to work within, kind of like in the throwback to the original sort of Matanui sort of situation. And what I came up with was I really wanted to do animals again, and some sort of incorporation of it that had really great functions, much like the first generation did and the second generation's sort of elemental creatures theme. So wanted to go with stuff that would be gear enabled and everything again, but also not make it too large. I found that the Toa were huge in Generation 2, which is great. They had tons of detail and everything, but I kept it at both a price point and a building difficulty level that might be out of reach of some younger kids, and that may have been more difficult if you have something at least in Canadian prices, for one hero out of 6 to be collectible would be sometimes $25, which is a lot for some families and other ones not, but I wanted to go for something that's a little bit under that. And same goes for the villains as well. So if you have smaller heroes compared to the villains, there's a lot more tension that way just by sheer scale and everything. But what I came up with at first was really just a very bare bones sketch where I had an idea of having some sort of earth-based fish that would be more kind of like a rockfish or something that's prehistoric, where they had like this huge sort of bony face to it, and that would have some sort of swimming incorporation into it. I wanted to do some sort of stone-based crab, like some sort of sand crab, and the reason why I have this particular model out is this is the one that I haven't modified since I first created it. After doing iterations of other various creatures, this is the one that I actually was happiest with, and oddly enough it's actually the most friendly. But in any case, the function of this is there's simply a gear on top, and using one hand you can have it swivel back and forth, and you can pinch its claws a little bit, as well as having the legs be able to move, sometimes in tangent with each other, just to make it essentially walk along. Beyond that, though, I had the idea of a fire squid, because I was thinking about how a lot of deep sea creatures thrive on heat, and I want to incorporate that into some sort of, again, a more sort of underwater creature. And I ended up going with a sort of ice-based bird. It almost looked like a seagull somehow, but then I looked more into Arctic birds and what their sort of designs would incorporate. And I wanted to have some sort of hammerhead shark or something that would have like a very distinct look to it, but also be somewhat familiar with existing creatures. For wind, though, I had no idea. I ended up going with essentially a pond gnat that would just be incredibly oversized, where it'd have really long spiny legs that would be able to, essentially with water tension, trying to sit on top of the surface. So that's kind of where I started out with. From there I went in a bunch of different directions to try and make essentially as fully fledged a world as I could, given the resources of being one person with suddenly a lot of free time on his hands now that he's graduated. And you know, at least I had a lot of content to work on in terms of, you know, seeing where this universe was and where it was sort of left off at the end of Generation 2, and I wanted to take it somewhat my own direction, but also kind of respect, you know, the general laws of how these creatures would live and work and play and things like that. And essentially I just have a sort of isolated version of that universe on my own, you know, sort of personal little island to work with. So that's kind of where the birthplace of Wild Shores, as it's known now, began. That wraps up my first video, guys. Thanks for watching. I've got quite a few others probably going to go on packaging, creature design, hero design, and then web design, as well as maybe something else if I think about it down the road. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.